What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On NBA, the biggest stories with the local experts. I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, also host of Locked On Rockets right here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today, we're joined by Adam Armbrecht from Locked On Nets to discuss the impact of Kevin Durant's injury for the Brooklyn Nets and the adjustments for both Kyrie Irving, Ben Simmons, and the rest of the supporting cast with KD out of the lineup for the next few weeks. But first, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Next game, how about Luka Doncic to score more than 26.5 points? What about LeBron James to have more than 7.5 rebounds? How about Giannis Antetokounmpo to have less than 6.5 assists? And what about Steph Curry to have more than 3.5 three-pointers made? So what is Prize Picks? It's daily fantasy sports, but how does it work? Basically, you pick 2 to 6 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 25 times back on your money on any entry that you submit. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college, you name it, they've got you covered over at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It's that easy. They offer safe and very, very fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Joining us now is Adam Armbrecht from Locked On Nets. You can find wherever you listen to your podcast. Just search Locked On Nets. Also available on YouTube. Now, Adam, Nets 27-15, number 2 in the Eastern Conference. But man, just when it felt like everything was coming together for this Nets team, and you suffer the setback of a Kevin Durant injury, now this team going to be without KD for at least a couple more weeks here. I do want to know the specific timetable at hand, but just how difficult is it for this team to lose KD right when it really did feel like everything was starting to kind of coalesce?
Yeah, I think, and thank you for having me on, Jackson. I think that it's difficult from the standpoint of you felt like you were on this run, that everything was in place, right? And you're getting this continuity. There's a lot of new players around Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving this year, and everything else has been put to the side. No off the court issues, no nonsense, just basketball. So him suffering the injury at this point was frustrating. And at the same time, you look at it and you say it was a 2-week reevaluation. It's going to be at least a month before he gets himself back out there on the court. You combine that with the long layoff that you get around the All-Star break. Listen, there's worse times to suffer an injury like this that doesn't seem like it's going to impact the long-term outlook this season for the Nets. And the other thing is that when you look at this roster, it's just far better constructed this year than it was a year ago, ironically around the same time when Kevin Durant had an injury, to be able to sustain, to be able to get through this stretch. And they've built up a nice bit of equity here, as you mentioned, being second in the East right now and having a solid record.
How do guys like Kyrie Irving and Ben Simmons need to kind of adjust their games in the absence of KD? And even beyond those two guys, just the rest of the roster, how do guys step up? Because filling the void that KD leaves is not exactly an easy task.
This is not what you call a one-to-one. Just replace Kevin Durant, insert other guy, right? Yuta Watanabe, give me 38 minutes and really take over ball games. But as Doug and I have talked about on the podcast, so much of it is just about, and we broke this down even by minutes for a lot of guys. Okay, Seth Curry, you're going to play 3 or 4 more minutes a game. And no, that's not a one-to-one, but he's an on-ball creator. He has a mid-range shot. And you've seen that already in these couple of games without Kevin Durant. Joe Harris, increase his minutes. Maybe get him back into the starting rotation here. Same thing for a Yuta Watanabe, for a TJ Warren offseason acquisition. So really, it's about the sum of the parts when it comes to the supporting cast. Now, when you go up the chain of command, Kevin Durant and Kyrie had this kind of nice balance at the start of this year where Kevin Durant, he basically is Mr. Consistency throughout all 4 quarters, but close to halves. And then coming out into the 4th quarter, Kyrie would kind of take over and cook a little bit. So the balancing act for Kyrie is not go hero ball, right? Because you feel like, well, now I'm the lone superstar and that's what I need to do. Let the game come to you, trust the supporting cast. And we've seen some good samples already with that. For Ben Simmons, it's a little bit different because the rare thing that he was able to pull off of having a double-double and not scoring any points the other night, like, it stands out. It's glaring. And there are moments in games, especially when you lost to Boston. Listen, it was a double-digit loss. Wasn't an easy recipe to win that game, except for the fact that Ben Simmons is in around the basket. And if he's just a little more aggressive and really looks to attack, you get rewarded with that. we want him to take that next step. But I don't think that you want to demand it right now in the absence of Kevin Durant, because it can lead to potentially more detrimental play from him. He's locked in defensively right now. He's doing incredible things from a facilitator standpoint. Yes, he needs to step up, and he's said as much in post games, needs to get his own shot. But I don't want him to try to do the next thing and end up diminishing things that he's doing right now at a very high level.
I know you have your concerns in there for it, but does it almost feel like this is, all things considered, like a potential silver lining to come from this is Ben Simmons almost being forced into that next gear, right? That more aggressive style of play in the absence of KD?
Yeah, I think, if Kevin Durant doesn't go down, and we're not counting our blessings that he did, but if he doesn't, then Ben Simmons gets to keep serving the very specific role that it is, right? Locking in defensively and setting the table. Now you have to. If you weren't going to do it on your own, and Jacque Vaughn has talked about this too, he needs to start to ramp up that next phase. If you weren't going to do it on your own, there is going to come times when you're going to have to do it over this month without Kevin Durant. And if you can't, especially with that trade deadline kind of looming here, it will be an indicator to Sean Marks in this organization. Hey, do we need to go out and do something to supplement what we have right now if Ben Simmons has a very clear ceiling in a specific area of his game?
Assuming everyone is healthy and available outside of KD, obviously, I mean, who steps into the starting lineup permanently for KD, and how drastically does that kind of affect rotations and whatnot moving forward?
Yeah, I mean, Joe Harris had been out of the starting rotation. Now, he dealt with like a little minor injury. Royce O'Neal has been a pretty permanent fixture there. We were a little bit surprised that was the first replacement when we went into that Boston game with Joe getting the nod. Now, Jacque Vaughn has a history as being an assistant coach, being an interim head coach, and Joe has been here. He's the longest tenured net, so I think there's a reward factor there. Matchup to matchup, it's going to change because, Joe has enough size when you have the right defensive pieces around him so he can hold his own against some guards. Seth Curry, undersized. You want a little more shot creation or defensive versatility, you're going to go to TJ Warren. Yuta Watanabe has been a nice little piece. It really becomes matchup based, but it looks like the smartest way to avoid disrupting more of your rotation is to put the guy who's been a starter in Joe Harris into that lineup and then build out from there. And remember, TJ Warren coming off of an long off-season injury, right? Ben Simmons has his own issues. Yuta Watanabe's never been a 20, 25-minute consistent guy. Even Seth Curry has always been kind of that off-the-bench, spark player for you. So you don't want to be disruptive in that way. It could just be symbolic, but I think Joe is the first answer, and then you build on there game to game.
Last thing here for you, Adam. I mean, over this next stretch, right, without KD, what do you want to see, or maybe what are your expectations for this team without Kevin Durant? What would you consider a win during this time frame?
Got to be above 500. It's probably not enough when you look at some of the teams they're playing against. There's some bad ones on there, especially Eastern Conference. So there's some very winnable games. We said this with Kevin Durant, you're a championship level team. Without Kevin Durant, you're still a really good basketball team, right? So I would think that they would be a back end playoff team if they didn't have Kevin Durant over the course of an 82 game season. So you want to be 500. Biggest thing you don't want to do is fall out of being able to compete for those top 2 or 3 seeds in the Eastern Conference. So that means staying in the top 6 seeds. They had about a 4.5, 5 game cushion over some of those teams when Kevin Durant went down. So be a couple of games over 500. And most importantly, show the consistency. Show the consistency in your roles. Don't get out of practice in those habits, because when Kevin Durant comes back, it's just about, again, falling right back into that rhythm and falling into line with what you need to do in support of the superstar. So maintain. And honestly, some guys like Ben Simmons show a little bit of growth, because those are things you can still build on here. By the time Kevin Durant comes back, you're going to be staring down 20, 25 games left in the season. It's going to be go time, right? It's ramp up and get dialed in, and you really don't have time to hesitate around what players need to be doing.
Can the Nets keep their footing without Kevin Durant in the lineup? Who steps up in KD's absence? Of course, you're going to cover for all of that and more over at Locked On Nets. Adam, I appreciate you stopping by Locked On NBA with me.
Anytime.